Hello everyone. Today's topic is on data science, its applications, and how to prepare yourself for a career in data science.
To begin with, I have to start with a brain teaser. So, do you guys see this image with a couple of matchsticks? Can someone try and get the equation right?
Or like 8 minus 4 equal to 4?
Yeah, minus 4 equal to 4. Yeah, that's correct. Someone else, do you want to give some other try? There are a couple of answers here.
One more answer we have got in the chat box. So it's like 5 plus 4 equal to 9.
Yeah, that's correct too. Any more try? Okay, great. Let me tell the other one. There is, okay, you can make it 0 plus 4 equal to 4 too. So, great. Yeah, I think we can start. Here is the content that I've planned for the presentation. So I'll start with a brief introduction, and then we'll move on to the organizational approach, where I'll discuss a little bit on how a business would adopt to data science, and then a deep dive into some of the technical concepts, then the process flow, the end-to-end pipeline of deploying a machine learning or artificial intelligence model, and then the career in data science, how you have to shape yourself, and a few things there. So to start with, what do you guys think data science is? Some of you might think that it's some magic trick or something like that. I just want to hear from you. What do you think about data science? Anyone, do you have any thoughts on what a data science is? I believe that some of you must have done some mini projects or some stuff on this space.
I feel like data science is just a studying of some particular data, using some algorithms to analyze the data to get a better outcome or to solve any real time problems.
Yep, that's correct. Okay, so let me put before you some of the theories under it. Okay, so uh, a lot of traditional approaches in programming, it's to program some way to solve the problem. Okay, so data science goes goes one step ahead, where you program so that the program can learn to solve the problem from the examples that you show it to them. Okay, so it helps in the decision making, and don't think that it's a magic trick or a something like that. So there is systematic approach to do it, and once you have enough data to deal with, and once you have enough historical data to deal with, then it's all about utilizing that data and trying to find insight out of it. So on a high level, that's what data science is all about. Okay, so uh, this is something that you see always, all these words. These are some buzzwords: artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, and data science. If you ask me if all of them are same, they're they're not, but they are very much related. And you can see very often that all of these words are what is it commonly used. I think you have to understand a little bit about the difference. So here, artificial intelligence is a bigger umbrella, where you can say, okay, let's say you have an Alexa, so that's an artificial intelligence. So the major concept underneath it is the machine learning. Okay, so within machine learning, then once you drill deeper and you build very complex systems, then it's deep learning. So data science is something which provides the tools and technologies, not provides, but okay, the approaches or the list of technologies. So data science is something that's used to manage all these stuff. Okay, so basically, the whatever it is, the statistics tools or the programming tools, whatever that's available to make all this possible, that's what data science is all about. So I just want to give you some idea on what's under all of these. What do I need to know to become a data science professional? Okay, so you need a little bit of mathematics and statistical skills. So it's only through statistics you are going to understand how the data is, how it's distributed, and stuff like that. And one more thing, what I have to tell is what you commonly call as machine learning. It's not a basic programming. There are a lot of mathematical functions under it. You have to code so that you might be able to put all these mathematical functions in the form of code. It should be in the form of programs or instructions to the computers. And to develop this pipeline and set up the whole process of automation, you need programming skills. And the third thing is the business knowledge. So this is something that's sometimes underrated among freshers, but business knowledge is something that you always want to know. So let's say you are working on some data set, you should have a very good understanding on each and every features of the data. So each and every columns in the data, you should have a very good understanding on what that mean. So in real time, you will have to do a lot of tweaks here and there in the data according to your business situation or what it means to the business. So business knowledge is very much important. So these are the three major skill sets that would be needed to enter into data science. You as computer science students, okay, so the first thing that you might see is the programming part of it. So if you use Python, then it's a one-liner, you can run an algorithm. But in work, if you want to understand, you really have to understand how each of these algorithms work. Let's say you call it a regression or whatever model it is. If you ask me what's behind, when you drill deeper, it's all mathematics. It's all mathematical functions. Some of the concepts in data science, the latest trend, let me say deep learning. So it has taken a lot of inspirations out of how our human brain works. Okay, so let's say, okay, you are I seeing an object. It sends that visual feed to the brain. Okay, so in the brain, there are a lot of cells in the cerebral cortex called neurons. So a lot of neurons will be waiting to acknowledge this information. It will be receiving this visual feed that is sent by the eye. So each neuron on its own will get certain information, okay, or every piece of the information that's sent by the brain. And on its own, it will not be able to understand what it is. But what it might think is, okay, let me pass this on to the next set of neurons, and it might be useful for them. Okay, so similarly, the next set of neurons will get a consolidated information from the set of neurons lying above, and in the end, there are millions of neurons that are grouped together, which form this magical mind that we have. Okay, so that's how the human brain works. In deep learning, so-called as neural networks, so each neuron is a mathematical function, which takes some information or a consolidated information from the set of neurons that are lying above, and it will process them. And it will send some information to the next set of neurons. Each neuron thinks it this way. I might not be able to get the complete information, but let me pass this on to the next set of neurons, which might be useful for them to take some decisions. Okay, so similarly, there comes a point where there will be a final set of neurons which will be looking at this in a consolidated manner, and that's how our brain works. So, and that's the same inspiration behind neural networks too. And if you see how these neurons are arranged in the brain, they are arranged parallel in the cerebral cortex, and coincidentally, that's how the GPUs develop too. It's the same concept. Let me move on to the next topic of the presentation, which is the organizational approach. So here I want to elaborate a little bit on how an industry would approach towards data science. So if you think about an industry, they cannot start a data science problem from day one. Okay, so let me put it in three phases. So hindsight, insight, and foresight. Okay, so again, these are terms that will be used a lot: descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics, and predictive analytics. So hindsight is all about, okay, looking at my data and seeing what happened. Okay, so maybe you visualize it, you do something. So you have data, you know what happened. Going and checking what happened is called as descriptive analytics. And then you have the diagnostic analytics, which is the insight part of it. Now you go and check your data and see why has it happened, what is really contributing to this output or the rise or fall of my business, whatever it is. Okay, then comes the predictive analytics. With your data, you will go and check what will happen in future. So the role the data science plays here is mostly on the insight and the foresight part. Okay, so but it cannot start with insight. You should have the hindsight done first. Okay, you should have all the descriptive analytics done first. You should have good data, good volume of data, where you know what is happening. This is how any industry would approach a data science problem. So what is a typical data science use case? Okay, so this is something that there are a lot of experienced people even struggle to understand what's a typical data science use case. So, but let me try to put it in simple terms. Okay, you guys are all, most of you guys are from computer science background. So if you think that something can be done with a simple if-else condition, if it rains, then don't play. If it doesn't rain, then play, something like that. If you can put it in simple if-else conditions, maybe a 2 or 3 nested if-else conditions, maybe with accompanied with some threshold, and if you can solve it, then it's not a data science use case. Okay, so you can still use case and derive your result, but it's not worth the cost involved in data science. And let's say if it is if your prediction is a result of some mathematical function, simple mathematical equation, okay, it could be a simple formula, then again, it's not a data science problem. So what makes a typical data science problem? So let's suppose that to make a decision, there are some human intelligence involved, and there are some humans diligently working towards making some decisions. And they might be factoring a lot of things, and they might use their intelligence to decide on something. Okay, so, and you have data collected for all of this, whatever actions they did, wherever they looked at, you have all the data collected. Now it's time to say that, okay, you have done all this hard work for all these days. Thank you very much. Let me look at your data and see if I can do something. Okay, so that's when data science starts. Okay, you try and do something to reduce all this human work or this manual work. Okay, so this is now a data science problem. Okay, so this is one use case. So let me try and tell a different use case. So you have enough data of how your customer behaved over all these days. Okay, starting from when you started your business. So you have all the data, how your customer behaved, and or anything that happened under different circumstances, whatever happened to your business. You have all this data captured. So with this data, you want to understand what might happen in future. Okay, so because you know that under these circumstances, this is the result. It's again, when it's 1 or 2 features, you can put it in if-else conditions. But when there are a lot of factors contributing to it, okay, but you'll not believe that, okay, to business of some company, the weather at that time might also be contributing. Okay, so there could be a lot of unknown factors. So, but you might have enough data to analyze, look at everything. So this is now a typical data science use case. So let me throw to you some of the common use cases. And some of these you must have seen already: fraud detection and churn prediction. Okay, so let me explain a couple of things here. Fraud detection. Okay, so I believe that some of you must have done some many projects on fraud detection or something. But let me put it on a how a business would look at a fraud detection problem. Okay, so you might think that, okay, out of this 100 people, I have to exactly pick the fraud and shoot them out. Okay, that's not how the business works. Okay, so they just want to reduce the manual work. So let's say there are 100 records coming for evaluation for a person today. Okay, so there's someone who is checking 100 records per day to check if they are fraud or not. Okay, so all that a business would look at is, okay, so maybe out of that 100, only 10 are frauds, 90 of them are not frauds. They want this person still to evaluate people who are fraud or assess the people who are frauds, whom the machine might suspect to be fraud. But if the machine can say that out of this 100, this 50, I can say with 100% confidence or with 80% confidence, I can say that they are not frauds, then the scope of work for this particular person who is assessing all these records is limited. Where he was looking 100 profiles before, now he's looking at only at 50 profiles. Okay, so this is how a business would start a machine learning problem. Okay, so eventually the machine might be well versed to do all this on its own, but this is how most of the business start. Okay, so they directly don't want the machine to shoot someone saying that it's fraud, because there's a lot of risk involved there. And risk in the sense, if someone is not a fraud and you say them to be a fraud, then it's a potential business loss. So again, something like churn prediction. You want to analyze the difference between the customers who stayed and customers who left. Okay, so that's what churn prediction is. So on a whole, if you look at data science, it's mainly about taking decisions, looking at data, different aspects of the data, factoring a lot of things, and maybe doing something that human was doing before. Okay, trying to reduce the work. That's how a business would want to march towards a data science problem. How data science would benefit business. So making quick decision helps increasing customers. Okay, so if I were to give an example, let's say a customer is looking for a loan. I might be a banking company, or let's say a customer is looking for a loan. And nowadays you can see that, okay, loans getting dispersed in seconds or minutes. Okay, but if you're asking them to wait for hours because you do have to verify something manually, and that might be a very good customer. Okay, you don't need have to do all this manual verification. Your machine can say with 80% confidence that they can be a very good customer for you. They have a good history of the account and everything. So you try to put data science there so that you don't lose your good customers. Okay, so this helps to attract customers too. Predicting potential negativities to avoid business loss. So like I said earlier, you might have a lot of data where you exactly know which are the factors that contributed to your uh, growth or a loss of your business. You know that when this particular factor goes up, then there could be a peak in my business, or when this goes down, there could be a fall in my business. You try and analyze all these stuff. So when you see that value dropping, then you might be able to predict that something is happening, and you might be able to act on it immediately or upfront. Okay, so and then identify patterns and similarities for better segmentation among customers data. Sometimes you want to understand different group of people among that data. Okay, not just in simple terms like grouping based on age. There could be different factors. A combination of factors could define a customer too. So, and you want to do marketing or something specifically to those customers. Okay, for this specific group of customers, let me do this so that they come to me again. For this specific group of customers, let me do something else so that they come to me again. Okay, so you do all of these, and then the next point, directing potential impacts with respect to change in business rules. Okay, so whenever your rules change, rules change in the sense, okay, let's say I'm working for a insurance company and they have a set of rules defined uh, before they approve a policy. Okay, when a quote is converted to a policy, there are a set of rules, a lot of rules. Okay, and there might be changes to these rules occurring every now and then. So today they might say this is the rule. Tomorrow they might want to tweak the rule a little bit. Okay, so now there will be a lot of analysis going on, like what was the situation before, and you can use data science to do all this stuff. Okay, so with the past rule, how my data is behaving, with the current rule, how my data is behaving. So you can detect all these potential impacts using machine learning algorithms. Okay, and then reduce cost involved in manual efforts. And some of the challenges. Okay, so in real time, there will be a lot of challenges, and specifically on collecting data. Okay, so let me go through each of the points here. Feeding intelligence is tough. Okay, so let me put before you some of the use case that one of the use case that we had, where they sell policies, insurance policies for homeowners, and they want to analyze whether there is a big tree near the home. Okay, then there's a high risk or something like that, because there will be a lot of landslidings or something happening in that area. So they want to analyze all these things. So if you are a human and if you're checking that image, you might be telling with a good confidence that, okay, this tree is this much meters away from the house. But for a system, it's different. Okay, it's different to train a computer to do all these tasks. Eventually they might do it, but there will be a lot of cost and effort involved in this. Then the next point, real world is messy. Look at this image that's on the right. Okay, you know that it's a stop sign. All the days you might have shown the machine only something with STOP, and this is what happens in the real world, and it is expected. It is expected to happen in the real world. So real world is messy. Factoring all these stuffs, it takes you have to accommodate for all these things whenever you are training a machine learning model. So data is not directly available. Data available is biased. So undefined indicators and metrics. So these are all some challenges that you will see with the data. So sometimes the data you are looking for is not directly available. You have to put in a lot of thoughts to produce the data in the way you want. If you're starting working on a data science problem, maybe it's on the fifth or sixth month. That's when you start trying some algorithms. Before that, maybe for 2 or 3 months, something like that, you'll be just working on the data, getting the data, putting it together. So that's something which takes a lot of time. So diving into some of the core concepts behind machine learning. Okay, so one of the biggest thing is data pre-processing. Okay, so let's say you have the data now. Like I said earlier, it's all mathematical functions behind. Okay, so if it's mathematical functions, then you can assume that all the data has to be numbers or something like that. Okay, so there will be a lot of pre-processing that you have to do on your data. Look at the image here. Okay, someone is asking, is this your machine learning system? And he's saying yes. And he's asking, okay, so you put the data in and you collect the results on the other end. Is that how it is? So what if the answers are wrong? And the man on the top of the pile, who might be a data analyst or a data scientist, he's saying that just to the pile until they start looking right. It should suit for a mathematical function, where in the real time, you will not get a data that directly fits into a machine learning model. You have to do a lot of pre-processing. Okay, so these are some of the thoughts behind why you need pre-processing. Like I said earlier, machine loves numbers. Okay, so if I have to go a little bit deep and say that how all these machine learning is done is, okay, in the background, it's all mathematical functions. So without a doubt, it's expecting numbers. Okay, and then machine expects data to be complete. Okay, so it expects that data doesn't have too many missing values or anything. Okay, so even if there are any missing values, then it expects that you should do something. Okay, so there are a lot of simple approaches like people substitute the missing values with mean, mode, or median or something like that under different scenarios. Or you can use your own business knowledge and derive it from somewhere else. Okay, so but when you are passing it to a machine learning model, it should be complete. Machine expects data to be normally distributed. Okay, so this is purely on the statistical front. Uh, Normal distribution is something like your data should be centered around the mean. Okay, so let's assume the mark of 100 students in your class. Okay, you can more or less say that, okay, this is the mean and all my data points, all the marks are around this. So similarly, the way most of the machine learning algorithms work, they expect data to be in such kind of fashion, okay, where the values are distributed around the mean. Or let's say if there's a yes or no, it would expect yes to have equal number of values like a no has. Okay, so that's how you would train a machine learning model. And then machine learns only features with relevant information. Okay, so again, to check features only with relevant information, there are a lot of statistical approaches like correlation that comes into picture here. But your machine don't want too much of noise. Okay, so some features might be contributing a little bit and still it's fine, you can keep it there. But your machine don't want too much of noise there when you are trying to train a model. And machine expects not to be fed with redundant information. Okay, this is obvious, right? So if you are feeding one feature with Celsius, then you don't want to put in another column where it says the Fahrenheit. Okay, this might match 100%, but there are a lot of things that go hand by hand. So you don't really want to put redundant information. You guys must be aware of these three topics. Machine learning, the types of machine learning. So one is supervised, then there is unsupervised, and reinforcement. Okay, so if I have to tell supervised, look at the image here. Okay, so someone is saying to this particular machine that's here, someone is saying a cube has 6 sides that are square. Okay, and now the machine says, I understand. Okay, so this is how a supervised learning would work. Okay, so you show something that's labeled in the sense annotated with what actually it is or what is the result. Okay, so this is your history. Okay, so you have enough history of this situation and what actually it is, this object and what actually it is. You have all this labeled information. Okay, and you throw it to the machine and it will understand. Okay, over time it will understand the similarities or what are your objectives. Okay, it will understand it and then it will do the prediction. Okay, we'll go deep into this later. Yeah, but okay, the next one, unsupervised. In unsupervised, you will not say that these are what the objects are, but what the machine does is it goes and checks all the things that are available. So you have a cube and then I think you have another something like a cup or something. Okay, so machine goes and understands the differences. Okay, so let's say there might be a future feature to understand if there are squares there or if there are circles there. Okay, so machine will be able to understand the differences and then it'll say that, okay, I'm seeing 2 different groups here, let me put it separately. Okay, so that's what you see here. The machine is saying that this looks like group. Okay, and then you have reinforcement learning, which is purely on trial and error based. Okay, so machine tries something and see if it is work. If it works, then there is a positive reward associated with it. If it doesn't work, then it's a negative reward associated with it. So now the machine tries a lot of things, which has positive rewards, negative rewards, and lands on its own. Okay, so it's like you don't have to train anything. So a lot of these reinforcement learning techniques are used in solving games. Okay, wherein a game, each move might have a positive or a negative reward, or a combination of moves can have a positive or a negative reward. So reinforcement learning is the technique used to uh, where they are training machines to learn about how games work. So these are some of the common algorithms that you see in machine learning. Okay, so like I said, there are three major types: supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning. And in supervised, you again have regression and classification. In unsupervised, you have clustering and dimensionality reduction. And below that, you see some of the common algorithms. There are a lot of algorithms, but these are some of the common algorithms like linear regression, polynomial regression, decision tree. I'll throw some lights on some of these algorithms and how they work. Okay, so maybe at this point it might be a little vague for you, but just try to understand, put it in a perspective that I have some data. How is the machine really understanding this data? This is how you have to see any algorithm right now. Okay, so yeah, like I said earlier, the supervised learning, you have some label data. So you have hexagons, triangles, and squares. Okay, so that's the data, and you know what the labels for each of these. And you send it for training. Okay, so now you develop a model which has understood all these, and then comes the prediction part. Now with this model, you are going to do some prediction. You are sending something, okay, which machine has not seen before, and then it is predicting it. This is how a supervised learning would work. How it works is you show a car. Okay, look at the image here. You show a car. You know it's a car. Okay, so and all the knobs that are inside this machine, understand those are the different features. One might say that, okay, I'm seeing some wheels or I'm seeing some circles, okay, something like that I'm seeing. And some of them might say that, okay, this is the length, okay, this is the width, this is the height. And there are a lot of features in that machine. Okay, you might be using this machine for a self-driving car. I'm just trying asking you to assume it. Don't think that machine learning is a machine like this. But I just want to um, put it in a perspective. So yeah, so all of these knobs here might be different features. So you show a car and you know that it's a car and the brightness should be on the blue side. Okay, so you adjust these knobs here, okay, so that the brightness goes up on the blue side. And when you show a human or a passerby when you're driving a car, so now you want the brightness to go on the green side. Okay, so you tilt the knobs here. So these knobs are different features. Okay, that explains the characteristics of an object. Now what you do is you show a lot of pictures of a car. You will show a lot of pictures of a human passerby on the road. Okay, you show a lot of pictures saying that, okay, this is a car, this is a passerby, this is a car. So a lot of samples is being shown. Now the machine will be able to compute some mean. Okay, so it will be able to understand this is the feature that's most important in dictating a car versus a passerby. And whenever there is some you turn it to the right or the left, okay, whenever there is some increase or the decrease in that particular value of that feature, then your machine will predict that it's a car. So initially you make the machine train with a lot of samples to achieve your objective function, and then it will understand what these features are, what really makes some importance, and then when you throw something for prediction, now it will be able to predict it. Okay, you might have the question how this is done. Okay, so let me go one step ahead. Okay, so you might have heard this algorithm called linear regression. Okay, so now I have only two variables here. With weight I want to predict height. Okay, but This is a very simple example, but in real time, you will not deal with scenarios like that. There will be a lot of features, okay, human weight, age, a lot of stuffs. You will use maybe 100 features to determine the height. Okay, so that's how in real world. But when I put it in 2 dimension, okay, just with X and Y, it becomes a little simple to understand. Okay, so let's say all these blue dots here that you see here, these are different, okay, weights or different heights of maybe the students sitting on your classroom. Okay, so let's say you take 50 of them and you say that, okay, when the height is this, okay, when the weight is somewhere here, the height of the person is here. Okay, so similarly you plot all of them. Okay, so you have the data of maybe 50 students plotted here. Okay, so now what you try to do is you try to draw a line which not exactly connects all these points, but covers all these points. Okay, maybe there is some, like, okay, some error that you'll see. This line, it's too far away from this point, but you can say that this line is more or less covering all these points. Okay, so now with this line, let's say you want to predict the height of person whose weight is somewhere here, okay, in the X line, and you can well say that with the line you can just draw a line vertical and say that, okay, the height might be here. Okay, so okay, visually you can understand that, okay, with the line, this is covering all these data points. So when I want to predict the height of a person, approximately I can say that, okay, this should be the height of the person provided his weight is this. Okay, so this visual representation can be put in the form of a mathematical expression too. Okay, so that's what you see in the right. Y is equal to mx plus c. Okay, so where y is the height, x is the weight. Okay, m is some slope. Okay, slope in the sense when 1 unit of weight increases, what's the increase in height? Okay, that's what the slope is. When there is a 10 kg change in the weight, you say that, okay, there is a 1 feet change in the height. Okay, so you exactly know there might be different units in x and y, but you exactly know when something changes in y, in the weight, how much it should change in the y-axis. Just like you visually predicted, you can use a mathematical formula to predict the same, to do the same. Okay, so that's the concept behind regression. Okay, similarly, you put a lot of features. Okay, so here there are only 2 features, only 1 feature used to predict the height. Similarly, you put a lot of features together where the machine would try to come up with the formula like y is equal to m1x1 plus m2x2 plus m3x3 plus so on, and some intercept. Okay, so this is what regression is all about. Then this is another famous algorithm called decision tree, which you can see commonly used in a lot of places. Okay, so this might sound to you like a simple if-else condition. Okay, so look at the image here. In the top, there is something called outlook. And if the outlook is sunny, if the outlook is forecast, then if the outlook is rainy. Okay, so it will be a nice kind of tree that will be formed in the decision tree. But where machine learning comes into picture is, okay, just by looking at a set of attributes, you might not be able to understand, I can put this attribute in the top. Okay, here they have put outlook in the top. Okay, so just by looking at number of features, you might not be able to understand, I have to put this particular feature in the top. Okay, so that's where machine learning comes into picture. So there are a lot of statistical approaches like entropy and information gain. So where you try to understand this particular feature has a lot of information. Okay, so now the feature which has a lot of information, you will put it in the top. Okay, so now there is, when you go to the next level, then again there is another set of computations. Provided the outlook is sunny, okay, now how much information can humidity provide? Okay, so provided the outlook is sunny, what information can humidity provide? Okay, so similarly you check for every attribute how much each of them can provide. Okay, what information that can provide, the one which can provide the maximum of information, you'll put it on the tray. Okay, so similarly this is how a machine would treat a decision tree. Just by looking at it, it might look simple, but this is where a lot of learning comes into picture. Okay, so obviously you want to put in the, okay, in the tree, the feature in the top should have a lot of information. Okay, so to split the data evenly, or and to a, what I say, to a good extent. This is another algorithm that you will see. Okay, so this is now not a two-dimensional plane, this is a three-dimensional plane. Okay, so where you have put in all the points when x is equal to this and y is equal to this, then the value of z is this. Okay, so similarly you have plotted a lot of points. Okay, so now we want to classify these two groups. Okay, so okay, so here all the red might be one group, maybe saying that, okay, these are all yes, and blue might be another group saying these are all no. Okay, so sometimes data can be like this. Okay, so you can just draw a plane there, okay, to separate it out. Okay, so to split between yes or no, machine to understand the difference between yes or no, now you can draw a, okay, there you can put a plane in between and split it. Now, okay, the equation that you see here is the equation of the plane. So what I want you guys to understand it, okay, visually it makes sense, and it also makes sense in mathematical terms. Okay, so what you see visually, you can put the same in the mathematical formula and make the machine to understand. Okay, so this is the core behind these algorithms. Okay, so then comes the unsupervised learning. Okay, what we have seen before, it's all supervised learning where you have enough data, okay, and you know that, okay, here you know that these are all red and these are all blue, you know everything. But in unsupervised learning, you might not necessarily know what data is being sent in the beginning, or you don't give those information upfront. Okay, so here we have a set of raw data, okay, apple, banana, and mango. Okay, so the machine will not say that it's an apple, it's a banana, or a mango, but it will be able to say that I see three different groups here. Okay, so that's what unsupervised learning is. Okay, it will not be able to say that, okay, this is, unless you say that this is a mango, it will not be able to say this is a mango. Okay, but it can understand the dimensions there, okay, the shapes there. So all this happens within the algorithm, and it will be able to see that, okay, maybe I'm seeing three different groups here. Okay, so that's what unsupervised learning is all about. Okay, so one of the common algorithm is k-means. Okay, so here again, what I've shown you is just two variables, okay, based on x and y. So you can see a lot of points here. Look at the left image before k-means. Okay, so there are a lot of points. Okay, so it's this approach called centroid. Okay, so initially it will pick a set of centroids. So what it will try to compute is it will try to pick a couple of centroids and arrange the data around that centroid. Okay, so how it works is when there's a new data point, you will see that, okay, it is which centroid it falls near to. Okay, so when there is a new point coming in, maybe at this point, now we say that it's near to this black cluster here. Okay, so that's how k-means clustering works. Okay, so again, like I said, it might be a little vague for you right now. but I just want to give you some idea. Okay, so visually it makes sense, and these are all these all make sense in mathematical approach too. Okay, so and then you have the another type of machine learning called reinforcement learning. Um, okay, so in the top, it's a kind of a game, right? Okay, so you have a robot or something standing at the point one, and it wants to reach the exit point. Okay, so that's the objective of this game. Okay, so now look at the image below. Okay, so and this is the environment, this gaming board, this is the environment. Okay, and you are reading it using some sensor, and you are saying that this is the current state. What is the current state? It's standing at 1, there is 2 at the top, 4 at the right. Okay, something like that. Oh, okay, you can say that. Okay, I cannot move at the left, I cannot move below. Probably I might be standing in the left bottom. Okay, so that's the current state right now. Okay, and now let's say you do some action. Okay, you move to the right, or try to move to the left. You might fail. Okay, so you try to do some action. Now you check where you are standing and what's the reward for your previous action. Okay, so for every move, you will get to understand what's the reward for my previous action, whether it's a positive reward or a negative reward. So there are algorithms like Q-learning. Under the hood, it works on this concept. It does on its own a lot of things. It tries to move here and there, and every move might have a positive or a negative reward. And over time, it will be able to understand, provided this situation, this should be my best move. Okay, so that's what reinforcement learning is all about. And then you have deep learning, like I said earlier. This is how our brain works too. Okay, so you see a nice little neural network here. Okay, so here it's not neurons. Here it's all, each of these little circles here that you see here are all mathematical functions. Okay, so the blue layer, which is in the beginning, it tries to get all the information from the let's say you are feeding an image, and it tries to get all the information from that image. And the objective of this problem is to predict if it's a yes or if it's a dog or not. Okay, so it tries to get all the information. Then, like I said earlier, each neuron on its own, it might be interested in learning something. Okay, it might be interested in getting some information from the previous neurons. Okay, where it might not learn everything. So here, are there, okay, it's asking, are there patches of the line? Okay, it's not just questions. Based on the input, it will understand if there are patches or not, and based on the information, it will understand. So some of these neurons will understand different features in the previous state. On its own, it will not be able to tell it's a dog or not, but it sends all its information to the next set of neurons. Okay, finally, there will be a neuron at the end, which will be predicting if it's a dog or not. Okay, so this is a simple neural network where we have just 2 hidden layers. Maybe it's only in the late 20th century they discovered that yeah, deep learning can be done with a lot of levels. Now there are a lot of hidden layers. A lot of the real-time use cases, it's done with a lot of layers. Okay, not just 1 or 2 layers. Okay, but under the hood, this is how it works. Like I said, it's deep learning. It's really complex. Okay, so but under the hood, it's all mathematical functions again. Okay. Okay, so I just want to take some questions right now. You guys can ask me if you have any questions on whatever that we saw until now.
So I have a small doubt.
Mhm.
So you have given me some common use cases, right? So like fraud detections and all.
Yeah.
So in that, could you please suggest which is the best algorithm for this fraud detection with these ML algorithms?
Okay, that's a very good
Yeah.
question. So let's say it's a fraud detection, right? Now it's a, you know that it's a classification problem. Okay, so when it's a classification problem, then the set of algorithms that comes to your mind is logistic regression, decision tree, random forest. It's again decision tree, a group of decision trees. But um, let me put these two. Okay, so let's not go to deep learning initially, but let me tell these two. Okay, so um, you have logistic regression and you have uh, decision tree. So do you know? Okay, can you assume when does a regression work better? Okay, so um, let me go here. This is what regression is. Okay, so based on some increase in x, are you able to say that okay, y is also increasing? Okay, so uh, if if most of its features, let's assume that your features, your feature set, you might say that okay, this is his credit score and something like that. So logistic regression works like this. Okay, after a point it will say that this is yes, before that point it says this is no. That's you can how you can assume it. um, okay, under the hood there are some functions to derive it, but just assume it this way. Okay, so uh, when it's moving on the explain, okay, when the value is increasing on the explain, after a point it's yes. Okay, before that it's no. Okay, so similarly with the credit score, after a point it's yes. Okay, before that it's no. Okay, so you're pretty much dealing with these kind of features, okay, which are mostly continuous. Okay, continuous in the sense they have a scale of value, like okay, maybe in the range of 0 to 100 or something like that. And when a lot of your data points are like this, then your first choice algorithm would be logistic regression. Okay, you would choose this to be done through a regression algorithm, because regression algorithm is well versed to understand these kind of scales, continuous features and stuff like that. Okay,
Okay,
but
sir.
let me put another perspective. Let's
Yes,
say,
sir.
yeah, let's say your data doesn't have a lot of these continuous features. Okay, it might be values like yes or no, true, false, something like that. Okay, a lot of categories. Then your first choice algorithm should be decision tree. Okay, so I wouldn't say that here in this case logistic regression would work. Here in this case decision tree will work. Okay, but the first algorithm that you are choosing to experiment with can be really based on how your data is. Okay, so again, if it's something that can be solved with simple machine learning algorithms, go with deep learning. Okay,
Okay, sir. So
you
as
don't
you
really want
said,
to go.
logistic regression and decision tree prefers to be the best when we compare it to other algorithms for these fraud detections. Am I right, sir?
Um, wasn't the case. Okay, not really the case. I'm just okay. Each algorithm would expect, okay, it would work better when the data is distributed in certain way. Okay,
Okay,
that's
okay,
how it
okay.
is. Okay, yeah,
Right, sir.
based on the distribution of, yeah, or how the data is plotted, you have to say that okay, maybe this algorithm works better. Okay, so uh, on most of the cases over a point you will try out a lot, but the first thing you should try, maybe you should really look at the data, how it's distributed, and say that okay, maybe this algorithm should work better, because that's how it is. What it's designed for. Okay, each algorithm is designed for something. Okay, so you really have to understand what it's designed for.
Okay, sir.
Is it?
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
I want to explain the end-to-end process involved in building a machine learning pipeline. Okay, so this is the flow. Um, it starts with some business understanding. You should exactly know what you're trying to solve. Okay, so um, with your business question, you should be able to write your objective saying that okay, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, so let's say your customer is okay. Well, your business is saying that I want to detect the frauds. I don't really want to detect the frauds, but I want to detect people who are not a fraud so that I have less data to look at. Okay, okay, someone to evaluate if they're really frauds. So now you put a machine learning use case like, okay, uh, predict people with 80%, okay, who are not a fraud with 80% confidence or something like that. Okay, so you really have to understand what your business is telling, and you should put it as a machine learning use case, right? When you are defining the okay, so if you look here, the step here is select the right type of problems to solve and picking the success measures. Okay, so picking the success measures in this particular scenario is, okay, so I can say a not a fraud as a not a fraud, but I can never say a fraud to be a not a fraud. Okay, then there is a lot of risk. Okay, even if I say that what I'm saying as fraud, then there is someone to look at it and analyze that, okay, whether they're really a fraud. But what are I'm saying as not a fraud, then they are leaving it to the machine itself. Okay, I'm saying when the machine is saying with 80% confidence that it's not a fraud, with the current business use case, then it's left there. There is no human to evaluate it or assess it. Okay, so but if your machine classifies it wrongly, then there is a risk. Okay, so here the success criteria is whenever it's not a fraud, whenever you are predicting that it's not a fraud, it can never be a fraud. Okay, at least 99% it should never be a fraud. Okay, so that's your success criteria now. Okay, so even if you say not a fraud to be a fraud, then it's not a problem because still there is a, well, I won't say that's not a problem. Okay, it's less risk. Okay, so the success criteria is very sensitive to whatever you are saying as not a fraud. Okay, so similarly with different use case, okay, in your mindset you might say that, okay, I have to classify what is fraud and what is not a fraud and what's the accuracy here. Okay, so that's not how it works in the real time. Okay, so that's where you must have seen evaluation metrics like precision, recall, and stuff like that. Those things come very much into the picture. Okay, it will be very much sensitive to something than the other. Okay, so you pick the right success criteria, then you go ahead and collect the data. Okay, so data, like I said, will not be directly available. Okay, there might be data from different sources. You might be receiving data from some IoT sources. You might be receiving data from some of your applications or some from third party. So now you have to collect all this data, preparing the data in the sense, okay, like I said, there are a lot of pre-processing involved here. Okay, so machine loves numbers. Okay, so you have to do certain things so that it would suit for a machine learning model. Then understanding data. Understanding data is the key here. Okay, so if I have to tell an example, okay, so let's say in my case, in the work that I have, okay, so when a customer is choosing for a insurance policy, okay, so we will check the number of drivers and we will check their background if any of them have their any of them have any violation. When you try to put it in a single record, you should really understand the data. Okay, so here you should say that if any of the person has violation, then to that policy I'll say that, okay, violation is true. Okay, if any of the drivers has violation, then I'll say that it's true. Okay, but if you understand it wrongly and if instead of any, if you use the all, then it's not appropriate for my use case. Okay, so you really have to understand this is very simple, but there will be a lot of things which you might not know upfront what exactly is the meaning, but to aggregate it and put it as a data point, you should know whether I should use, this is one example I'm saying, whether I should use any or all. Okay, only something will work on some scenarios. When you use all, then okay, it might say false because only one driver is violated out of four, but that's still a risk. Okay, you have to, if even if any of the driver has previous violations, you should say that there is a risk. Okay, so you should have a very good understanding on what the data is. Okay, and then feature engineering. So there are a lot of approaches like feature selection, feature elimination, and it's mostly on the statistical front, how you check, select these are the features that I need. I'm not going too deep into that. Then you have the model building phase where you train different. Okay, initially you just build some models. Okay, where you explore and train different models. That's the next step. Okay, finding rapid insights. Rapid insights in the sense. Okay, so doing some quick predictions and then evaluating the models. Then you'll do this model iteration. You will iterate it, put it in different variety of data. Okay, so before you deploy it, there will be a lot of things that you'll do. Okay, so then comes the deployment phase. Okay, where you will actually deploy this model or the artifact of this model in a real time. Okay, so this is how the flow goes. Okay, so most of the time taken will be before feature engineering. Okay, so let's say if I had to um, okay, split it, maybe you'll spend at least 60% of your time until the point you reach feature engineering. Okay, and model building might take only 10 to 15% of your time. Okay, and again, there comes a scenario that when your model is not good, doing good, then you go and reiterate the process again, maybe start from the beginning, collecting few more data. Okay, so it goes as an iterative process. Sometimes it takes a lot of time than what you would anticipate. Okay, so and then comes the evaluation part and the testing part, where again you will spend a lot of time to make sure that this model is performing well if I'm putting it in different situations. Okay, so process wise, this is a very lengthy process and it takes time. Okay, when you're putting it in real time. And this is how okay it works in a company, in a business. Okay, so you have all the historical data. You are developing the model with the historical data. So this process, okay, this is the training phase, and then you put this model artifact for prediction, and you get your prediction done. Okay, so it never stops here, just like this. Okay, so even this live data, whatever that you are sending for predictions for, okay, so you train with historic data and you use live data for prediction. So even this live data will be sent back to the historical data. Okay, so and maybe you will retrain the model once a day, once a week, once a month, or whatever it is. Okay, whenever there is, you see that there is some change to the business, you would like to retrain the model a little bit, and you collect all these feedbacks. Okay, it will be like a loop. Okay, you just don't deploy it and say that okay, predict something. Okay, so let's say today it's predicting 80% of the customers to be good, and tomorrow it's saying that okay, only 50% of the customers are good with a change in business rule or with a different model. Then you can pretty much assume that there might be something going wrong, because all these days I have been seeing this proportion and now the proportion is different. Okay, so your work doesn't end just by deploying something. You will get all these feedbacks in the sense, in form of some numbers, in some form of metrics that you might be interested in. You might get all this feedback and yeah, pass it on again, okay, to the model. Okay, so you will that's how it goes. Okay, so this is the complete life cycle. Okay, so once you deploy it, then you evaluate it, management in the sense, whenever you are, okay, you might have a model today You might have developed a model for today, and tomorrow there might be a new model. Sometimes you don't just replace it. Okay, so you might send 50% of data here and still have 50% of data to the other one. Okay, so instead of replacing, you manage it differently. Okay, so because you just don't, because it's all machine. Sometimes when you want to take only less risk, you manage it differently. That's what management is all about. So the way you want to manage it, you have to manage it appropriately. And then comes the monitoring, where you have to really evaluate what what your machine learning model is doing. Okay, so now to the last section, uh, how to shape yourself for a career in data science. Okay, so if you want to be a data science professional, then you have to think like a data science professional. Okay, so how does a data science professional think? Okay, he might think, what is the world like right now, and what is the world going to be like? Okay, how is my business right now? How is the business going to be like? Okay, so this is the mindset of the data science professional. Okay, to understand what is the world like, you might use the data, okay, to see how it's distributed, what its patterns are, okay, and is there any trends or seasonalities behind it, and then to what is the world going to be like, then you might train it with some data and, okay, develop a model which can be used for, okay, which you can use for saying that, okay, this is the world, this is how the world is going to be like. Okay, this is how my business is going to be like. Okay, so this should be the thought process of a data science professional. So if you want to enter this field, start tuning your mindset in this way. If whenever you look at data, see what this data means, what it's trying to tell. Okay, so what is really impacting something that I'm interested in. Okay, so okay, so these are the common job roles: data engineer, data scientist, data analyst, and there are a lot of other things that you'll see, like, okay, artificial intelligence developer, machine learning engineer, a lot of different things. But okay, let me stick to these three. Okay, these are the common things that you'll see. Okay, so data engineer, you might need some programming and business knowledge. So it's mainly about putting your data, getting your data, and putting it in the right format. Okay, where it adds a lot of business meaning. Okay, so where you might do a lot of consolidation from different data sources. That's the work of a data engineer. Data analyst will go and check what it really the data is saying, using some mathematical and statistical approaches. And data scientist, um, what I say, yeah, you should know everything. If you have to start preparing for a career in data science, this is how you have to start. You have to start with a little bit of mathematics, like maybe you have to start with statistics, some of the probability concepts, some of the um, linear algebra concepts like this line equation stuffs like that, then some of the matrix concepts. Okay, so this is uh, maybe you can research a little bit on what is needed really in mathematics. Okay, so okay, it has it listed here: statistics, probability, and calculus. So you should start from there, get some database knowledge and some programming. Python or R. Python is preferred in a lot of places right now. And then data engineering, then the machine learning, good understanding on all algorithms, deep learning, big data, data visualization. Okay, so these are the different skill set you have to develop, um, but you cannot. Okay, it should go in a phase. Okay, so you can start from here, and somewhere you will reach there. So data science toolkit. So some of the libraries or whatever that's available that you can use. Control for AI. So this is some library that I have developed. Okay, so it's an open source library, so anyone across globe can use it. This really does a good pre-processing stuff. Okay, so this is used in my company too, and a lot of other guys are using it as well. So, and it's open source. Okay, so and whatever we have done so far here, it's mainly centered toward pre-processing for different algorithms. And best thing about this is, okay, you don't really have to write a lot of code. Instead, you have to say, do this, it'll do that. Okay. When you don't say do this and that, okay, it will still do a little bit of basic pre-processing. Okay. So there are a lot of things, and maybe it might not make sense to you at this point, but once you start exploring on the space, you can when you look at it later, then it might make sense. If you're doing some data science related works already, then you can have a look at it. You can search for Control for AI on Google, and it should take you to that page, the official Python library page. Okay, so and then there are a lot of popular libraries. Some of you might be aware of this. Like, okay, so there are frameworks like TensorFlow, MXNet, Keras, and SparkML. There are a lot of libraries like Scikit-learn, Panda. So this will be very much useful in getting your data science work done. I think I'm on the top of the hour.